I'm Mike. I live in a quiet suburb in Oregon with my wife Jenna and our two kids, Emily and Noah. They're 7 and 5. This happened last fall, around October, when the air starts to get that sharp chill and the leaves pile up in the gutters overnight. I work from home during the day as a freelance web designer, and Jenna's a nurse on a rotating shift. We've always had a good routine. The kids go to school, I do my work, Jenna comes and goes depending on her schedule, and at night we're usually all in bed by 10. Nothing ever happens around here. It's the kind of neighborhood where people leave their garage doors open during the day and wave at each other on morning walks. At least, it used to be that kind of place. I first noticed something weird about the garage light. It's one of those motion-activated ones above the side door, the one that faces the backyard. Every couple of nights, I'd glance out the kitchen window and see it flicker on, stay lit for maybe a minute, then turn off. At first, I figured it was the wind catching the bushes or maybe a raccoon. It didn't happen every night, just enough for me to notice a pattern, usually around 2 or 3 in the morning. Jenna laughed it off when I mentioned it, saying maybe the sensor was dirty or misaligned. I didn't think much of it either. The side door's usually locked, and we live in a safe area, so I chalked it up to a glitch and forgot about it. Then, about 2 weeks later, I was grabbing a frozen pizza from the garage freezer when I noticed something behind it. The freezer's pushed up against the wall with just enough space to toss grocery bags into the gap, but something caught my eye: a crushed plastic water bottle, and next to it, a small pile of cigarette butts. Neither Jenna nor I smoke, and we rarely have guests. Right away my stomach dropped. It felt wrong, like stumbling into someone else's mess in your own space. I stood there for a while just staring at it. It wasn't like the trash blew in or anything. It was hidden, tucked behind the freezer like someone didn't want it seen. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about those cigarette butts. Who the hell had been in my garage? And when? The side door had one of those push-button locks, not high security, but solid enough. I double-checked all the entrances, turned on the outside lights, and even left a broom angled against the door to see if it would move. The next morning, it had fallen. Not like it had tipped over. It looked set aside, like someone gently picked it up and laid it down. That was when I bought a motion-activated camera off Amazon. Nothing fancy, just one of those that send clips to your phone when it detects movement. I set it up in the corner of the garage, pointing right at the side door. The first 2 nights, the camera didn't catch anything. I started thinking maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I'd dropped that broom myself and just didn't remember. But on the 3rd night, a Thursday, I got a notification at 2:47 a.m. My heart was pounding before I even opened the app. The footage was grainy, lit only by the garage light flicking on, but clear enough to see a figure. A man. Tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. He came in through the side door like he knew exactly how to open it, walked slowly past the freezer and then just stood there, not moving, for almost 5 full minutes. And then, without touching anything, without saying a word, he turned around and left, closing the door behind him. I must have watched that clip 100 times. The way he stood there, not looking at the tools or the shelves or anything else, just facing the interior window that looked into the house, into the kitchen, where I stood almost every night making tea before bed. It made my skin crawl. There was something too calm about him. Like this wasn't his first time. Like he was comfortable. That was the worst part. He didn't seem like someone breaking in. He seemed like someone who'd been there before, maybe even a lot. I showed Jenna the video that morning, and she immediately burst into tears. We didn't tell the kids anything, just said the garage was off limits for now. The police came that afternoon. I gave them the footage, showed them the cigarette butts and the bottle. They took fingerprints, made some notes, and told us to keep the camera running. but I could tell they weren't treating it like a big deal. "Might be a drifter," one of them said. "Probably looking for a place to crash." Still, we changed the side door lock, added a deadbolt, and I started sleeping downstairs on the couch with a baseball bat next to me. It felt dramatic, but I couldn't shake the image of that man just standing there in the dark, staring in like he was waiting for something. 3 nights later, it happened again. This time the camera caught him trying the new lock. He didn't force it, just stood there, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly like he was thinking. Then he leaned toward the window, pressed his forehead against the glass for a few seconds, and left. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just trespassing. He was studying, observing, and that made it 1,000 times worse. He wasn't surprised the lock had changed. He wasn't confused. It was like he expected it, like he was planning around it. After that second visit, I barely slept at all. Every little sound made me jump. The house felt smaller, more fragile. I started checking the camera footage every hour, even during the day. Jenna was on edge too, jumping at shadows, double-checking the kids' bedroom locks. Then one morning, while taking the trash out, I noticed something taped to the side of the garage, behind the trash bins, where we wouldn't normally see it. It was a wrinkled piece of notebook paper. On it, in blocky, uneven handwriting, was a list of names: Emily and Noah. Next to each name were times, pickup, lunch, recess, their school schedule. Every single detail was accurate. That broke something in me. I didn't just feel scared anymore. I felt hunted. Someone had been watching my kids long enough to map out their entire routine. I drove straight to the police station and demanded to speak to someone higher up. This time, they took me seriously. They had an officer assigned to sit near the school during drop-off and pickup, and a patrol car started making regular rounds in our neighborhood. They also pulled prints from the note and cross-referenced with the ones they got from the garage. A match came up within days. Some guy named Curtis Brenner, 38 years old, no fixed address, arrested a few times for trespassing and petty theft. Nothing violent on record, until now. They picked him up a few blocks from our house, near a park bench that overlooked the back of our property. He had a backpack with him. Inside they found a folding knife, a length of nylon rope, and another notebook with more notes about our family. What time our bedroom light usually turned off. When Jenna's car was gone. Even details like what brand of cereal the kids liked. I still feel sick thinking about it. We were watched for weeks, maybe months, and had no idea. We'd been so naive, so used to feeling safe. Turns out the only reason he hadn't gotten inside the house yet was because the locks on our main doors were too new. He was waiting, watching, planning. Curtis pled guilty to attempted burglary and stalking. He's still in jail, and we moved 2 months after his arrest. We couldn't stay. The house felt poisoned. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of the porch light made my stomach twist. The kids don't know the full story, just that someone bad was coming around, and we had to go somewhere safer. And maybe that's true. We're in a new town now, with cameras on every corner of the house, and a German shepherd named Max who doesn't sleep unless we do. But every now and then, when I walk past the new garage, I still feel that prickle on the back of my neck, like maybe someone's watching. I'm not really the type to post stuff online, but I've been reading this forum for a while and figured maybe getting this off my chest would help me sleep better. My name's Erin. I'm a 34-year-old single mom, and I live with my 7-year-old son Noah in a small rental house out in the rural part of Washington state. Lots of pine trees, long gravel roads, neighbors far enough that you can scream and no one hears you. This happened last spring, not long after I got a new job working part-time at a bakery in town. We moved here for a quieter life, something away from the noise of the city, just me and my boy. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Most of our days were quiet, almost peaceful. I'd drop Noah off at school around 7:30, head to work, and be back by early afternoon. He stayed in aftercare until 3. Our routine didn't change much. I always kept the doors locked, never felt unsafe. But then I started noticing things. Small things at first. A box of granola bars a little emptier than I remembered. A few slices of bread gone when I hadn't made sandwiches. At first I chalked it up to me being tired or Noah sneaking a snack. He's got this mischievous grin that makes it hard to stay mad. But still, something about it bothered me. Then one afternoon I came home early. Bakery was slow, so they let me clock out at noon. I walked into the kitchen and noticed the pantry door was slightly open. Not just open, ajar, like someone had been in a rush. There were breadcrumbs on the counter and 2 apples missing from the fruit bowl. I called out for Noah even though I knew he wouldn't be home for hours. And of course, silence. That was the first time I felt that weird tightening in my chest, like something wasn't adding up. I did a full sweep of the house, room by room, but nothing else seemed out of place. No broken windows, no doors left unlocked. Still, I didn't like it. What really pushed me over the edge was what happened that Saturday morning. I was folding laundry in my bedroom while Noah watched cartoons in the living room. And then I heard it, this harsh, rattling cough. It was faint, but distinct. It wasn't coming from inside the house. I froze. For a second, I actually thought it might have come from the TV. But Noah was watching some loud, animated thing with no dialogue. I held my breath, listening again. Another cough. This time I could tell it was coming from outside. More specifically, from the shed in the backyard. I should explain, the shed isn't some tool shack. It's a decent-sized structure, maybe 15 feet from the house, with these old wooden double doors, and a single grimy window on the side that's almost entirely covered by ivy. I'd barely used it since we moved in, just stored some boxes and Noah's old tricycle. I always kept it locked, or at least I thought I did. That morning, I looked out the window above the sink and saw that the door was closed. But there was a deep footprint in the patch of mud just outside it. The kind you only get if someone's been standing there for a while. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I grabbed my phone, locked all the doors, and told Noah to stay in his room and not open the door for anyone. I didn't want to go outside. I didn't even want to move. But my hands were already dialing. I called my neighbor, Troy. He's this retired guy who lives across the way, used to work construction and always keeps a rifle in his truck. Told him what I heard and asked if he could just come take a look. He showed up within 10 minutes, faster than I thought possible. I watched from the kitchen window as he walked over to the shed, knocked twice on the door, and then stood still. He turned his head like he was listening. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could tell something had spooked him. He pulled out his phone, walked back toward the house and mouthed, "Call the cops." I was already ahead of him. The police arrived maybe 20 minutes later, 2 deputies in separate cruisers. They told me to stay inside while they approached the shed with weapons drawn. I held Noah close on the living room floor, heart beating out of my chest, praying to a God I wasn't even sure I believed in. I couldn't see much from the window, but I heard the yelling. "Hands where we can see them!" Then a pause. Then more yelling. Then nothing. For a long while. Eventually, one of the deputies walked back to my door and told me calmly that they'd found someone living inside. A man, alone, dirty, disoriented, and armed with nothing but a pair of binoculars and a notebook. His name was Brent. Brent Kinney. I'll never forget that name. He was in his late 40s, greasy hair pulled into a limp ponytail, wearing one of my ex's old flannels that I didn't even remember donating. They said he didn't resist, just sat there on this pile of blankets like he belonged. The shed smelled like mold and something much worse. They didn't let me go inside, but Troy later told me it reeked of old food and urine. Brent had been sneaking into the house during the day. When I was at work, he'd been stealing things in small doses. A bar of soap here, a shirt there, even Noah's toothbrush. I felt sick when I heard that. Violated in a way that's hard to explain. But the worst part wasn't what he took. It was what they found. In one of the plastic bins he'd been using as a makeshift table, the deputies found a worn-out notebook filled with pages of cramped handwriting. Brent had been watching us. For weeks, maybe months. He wrote down everything. The time I left for work, what I wore, what time Noah got off the school bus, what shows we watched in the evening. He even wrote about what groceries I bought. It wasn't just observations, it was plans. He wrote about how he liked the way I laughed through the kitchen window, how domestic everything felt. He wrote that he was waiting for the right moment to move in. That sentence stuck with me for weeks. Like we were animals in a zoo, and he'd been waiting for the right time to climb into the enclosure. The scariest page had a hand-drawn map of the house. He'd labeled the rooms, marked the doors, the windows. Even noted that my bedroom window was slightly cracked some nights. There were weird little scribbles about getting rid of obstacles, and we don't even know what that means. The sheriff didn't give me all the details, but one of the deputies let slip that Brent had done time for stalking before. Something about an ex-girlfriend he tried to reconnect with by breaking into her house and living in her attic. I didn't ask more. I didn't want to know. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after that. Just lay in bed holding Noah's baseball bat and watching the hallway like it was war. They took Brent away in cuffs. He didn't say a word. Not to me, not to the officers. Just walked past my window with his head down like he was embarrassed. I don't know how long he'd been out there. The shed had no insulation, and the nights had still been hitting the low 40s. The police told me he must have had some kind of rhythm, watching us through the binoculars, waiting for the car to pull out, sneaking in through the back door I sometimes forgot to double-check. I hate that I made it that easy. I hate that I didn't know someone was that close. That someone felt entitled to our lives. After it all, I had the landlord come out and replace every lock on every door and window. Troy helped me install motion sensor lights and a security camera that points straight at the shed, which I now keep bolted shut with a padlock the size of my fist. I still live in the same house, but I don't breathe as easily as I used to. I still find myself pausing before entering rooms, listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. I still dream about the cough, but I haven't seen or heard anything since. Brent's back in custody, and as far as I know, they're keeping him for a long time this time. Still, every time a floorboard creaks or the wind rattles the back gate, I find myself holding my breath again, just in case someone else decides they want to move in. I'm not the type of guy who scares easy. I'm 32, work in logistics, and I spend a ridiculous amount of time on the road. Airports, rental cars, stale hotel coffee, the whole deal. This happened last October, when I was sent to a small town in New Mexico for a last-minute client meeting. Everything had been booked up in town because of some local festival, so I had to stay about 30 minutes out, in this crusty roadside motel called the Desert Palms Inn. It looked like the kind of place truckers crash at when they've been driving too long, real quiet, mostly empty. I figured I'd be in and out in 2 nights, tops. The first night was uneventful. The room was basic, brown carpet that felt like sandpaper, floral bedspread that smelled faintly of smoke, and a tiny bathroom where the hot water screamed when it came on. Still, it had a bed and decent Wi-Fi, which was all I needed. I FaceTimed my wife, watched some random documentary on my laptop, and passed out around midnight. Nothing weird, just some creaky pipes and the occasional hum from the ice machine outside. I even remember thinking the place was better than I expected, all things considered. The second night, though, that's when things started to feel off. I'd just come back from a long dinner with the client and was brushing my teeth when I noticed this faint tapping sound. Like someone gently drumming their fingers on glass. It was coming from behind the bathroom mirror. At first I figured it was the plumbing. The motel was old, after all. Or maybe even some weird resonance from the vent above the sink. I even laughed a little, thinking I was just tired and paranoid. But when I leaned in closer, the tapping stopped. Dead silent. Like it knew I was listening. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I'm used to weird noises in hotels. I've heard couples screaming at each other through the walls, kids running up and down hallways at 3 a.m. Hell, once I even heard someone playing the accordion. But this felt different. Personal. Like something was on the other side, waiting. I ended up turning the bathroom light off and going straight to bed. I slept like crap. Every time I started to drift off, I thought I heard something shift in the walls. Not loud, just subtle, like the sound of fabric sliding against drywall. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I checked the bathroom again in the daylight, expecting maybe to find a loose tile or a crack behind the mirror that could explain the sound. But the mirror was solid, bolted in tight. Still, there was this weird draft. Cold air leaking from behind it, just barely noticeable if you stood close enough. That's when I started to really look at the mirror itself. It wasn't flush against the wall like most are. There was maybe half an inch of space around the edges, just enough to slide a pinky finger into the gap. I remember thinking, that's a weird way to mount a mirror. And then I left for my meeting, trying to convince myself I was being ridiculous. That night, though, I couldn't let it go. I got back to the room around 9 p.m., and the second I walked in, I swear the air felt heavier. Not hot or cold, just thick, like the air hadn't moved in a while. The room smelled faintly of something new too, like burnt coffee and old cigarettes. I don't smoke, and I hadn't noticed that smell before. I stood there for a while just listening. Nothing, no tapping, no shifting. Just dead silence, which somehow made it worse. I turned every light on, checked the closet, even pulled the bed from the wall to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Finally, I went into the bathroom, took a deep breath, and decided to find out what was behind that mirror. I used a pocket knife I keep in my backpack to pry off the plastic frame. It was surprisingly easy, like it had been taken off before. Behind the mirror wasn't a solid wall like I expected. It was a cutout, like a hidden panel, leading into a shallow crawl space. The smell hit me first. Stale sweat, tobacco, something sour like spoiled food. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it into the darkness. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was a filthy sleeping bag shoved into the corner, surrounded by empty fast food bags, crushed soda cans, and a pile of cigarette butts. Some of them were still faintly warm. I don't even remember backing out. I think my brain just switched to autopilot. I slammed the mirror back in place the best I could and sat on the bed, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. A million thoughts ran through my head. How long had someone been in there? Were they watching me this whole time? Had they crawled out when I was sleeping? I didn't hear anything. But what if they were waiting for me to leave? I wanted to get out right then, but I also didn't want to run into whoever had been hiding in there. So I locked the door, dragged the armchair in front of it, and stayed up all night with the bathroom light on, just listening. As soon as the sun came up, I grabbed my bag, checked out, and drove straight to the nearest police station. I told them everything: the mirror, the crawl space, the sleeping bag, all of it. At first, I could tell they thought I was exaggerating, maybe trying to stir up drama about a shady motel. But when I offered to show them the photos I'd taken with my phone, and yeah, I took pictures of everything before leaving, their tone shifted real fast. They sent an officer with me back to the Desert Palms Inn within the hour. The motel manager, some skinny older guy named Ron with yellow-stained fingers and a voice like sandpaper, looked totally confused when we told him. He kept shaking his head, saying no one had been using that space, that it had just been an old utility gap that was sealed up years ago. But when the officer took off the mirror again, the crawl space was still there, even messier than before. Like someone had left in a hurry. The officer shined his flashlight further in and found something I'd missed. A small hole in the wall, barely larger than a coin, with a clear view straight into my bathroom through the vent. That's when things got real. Turns out, the space behind the mirror connected to a narrow maintenance tunnel that ran behind multiple rooms. They found signs of someone living in there, not just in my crawl space, but behind at least 2 other mirrors in the same building. Cigarette butts, food wrappers, even a worn-out baseball cap and some Polaroids that, thankfully, weren't of me. The police told me later that they believed it was a drifter, a guy who'd been quietly sneaking into rooms through unlocked maintenance doors and living in the walls, watching guests through vents and slats. They suspected he'd done it before, in other towns. No cameras ever caught him entering or leaving. Just gone. The weirdest part? My room had been entered. There were small signs that only I would have noticed. The zipper on my duffel bag in a different position. My phone charger moved slightly to the left, the way the corner of the blanket was folded. Nothing big enough to trigger alarm, but just off. Like someone had been in there, careful not to leave a trace. I still get chills thinking about it. The motel shut down for renovations not long after, but the guy was never caught. To this day, I have no idea how long he was in there, or how many nights I slept with someone just a few inches away, silently watching me through a crack in the wall. I've stayed in a lot of hotels since then, but I never look at mirrors the same way. First thing I do now, every time I check in, I tap on the glass. Then I run my fingers along the edges, check for airflow, and shine my phone light into every vent. People laugh when I tell them this story, say it sounds like something out of a movie. But I lived it. And the scariest part wasn't finding the crawl space. It was realizing that for at least 2 nights, I wasn't alone. I just didn't know it yet. I moved to Portland in the spring of last year, right after turning 30. It was one of those fresh starts you don't exactly plan. My lease ended, I broke up with someone I probably should have left years ago, and I just packed my life into my Civic and left. The apartment I found was small but cozy. Ground floor, hardwood floors, big front window that let the sunlight pour in during the mornings. I was freelancing from home at the time, mostly copywriting gigs, so I wanted the place to be clean and peaceful. But between work and trying to adjust to a new city, I was exhausted all the time, and cleaning became one of those things I kept putting off. I found him on Craigslist under Home Services, Cleaning. His name was Brian. The ad was pretty simple, something like thorough cleaning, reliable, respectful, affordable. No photo, but the reviews were decent. A few people even left their phone numbers and said to text them if I wanted confirmation he was legit. That made me feel a bit better. I reached out and he replied within the hour. He was polite, said he could come the next morning and quoted a reasonable price. He didn't ask many questions, just the address and whether I had any pets. I told him no, and that was that. When Brian showed up the next day, he looked pretty normal. Maybe mid-40s, scruffy but not in a bad way. Khaki pants, gray hoodie, soft voice. The kind of guy you wouldn't really notice in a crowd. He barely made eye contact, but he smiled when I offered him coffee, and declined politely. I showed him around the apartment, pointed out the usual spots, bathroom, kitchen, windows, and then I went into my room to work while he cleaned. He moved fast and didn't make a sound, like he was trying not to be a bother. After he left, the apartment looked and smelled amazing. He even folded the throw blanket on the couch in this perfect little rectangle. I texted him a thank you and booked him again for the following week. For about a month, everything was fine. He'd come in once a week, always around 10 a.m., always done in a couple hours. We barely talked. I'd usually stay in my room with my headphones on while he worked, but then little things started to feel off. I remember the first time I noticed something weird. A photo of my sister and I that I keep on my bookshelf was turned face down. It was subtle, like maybe I'd bumped it, but I hadn't touched that shelf in days. A week later, I couldn't find this one specific pair of underwear. It was this red cotton pair with little stars on it, and I knew it was clean because I'd just done laundry. At first I chalked it up to me being disorganized, but after the third or fourth small thing, a knot started to grow in my stomach. The weirdest part was how small the details were. One time, I found a spoon in the bathroom trash. Just one stainless steel spoon, clean but out of place, like it didn't belong there. Another time, I noticed my shampoo bottle had been moved a few inches from where I always leave it. I know that sounds paranoid, but I'm one of those people who lines up everything perfectly in the shower. I started wondering if maybe Brian was just absent-minded, or if he was accidentally moving stuff while cleaning. Still, something didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just what was out of place. It was the feeling afterward. Like the air in the apartment had shifted somehow. Like someone had stood too close to you without you noticing. Then came the night I came home from the grocery store and found my front door unlocked. Not wide open, just unlatched. And I was sure I'd locked it. I remember standing in the hallway holding 2 bags of groceries, just staring at the doorknob. I live alone. No one else has a key. I even double-checked the lock before I left because I'm anxious like that. I went inside, heart pounding, and checked every room. Closet. Under the bed. Shower. Nothing. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I didn't sleep much that night. That's when I decided to buy a camera. I didn't want anything super fancy, just something discreet that I could check from my phone. I ordered a small indoor camera and placed it high up on a shelf in the living room, angled toward the front door and part of the hallway. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Brian. I figured if something was actually happening, I'd catch it. But a part of me hoped it was all in my head. That I was just stressed or lonely or watching too many true crime videos before bed. The first few days? Nothing. Just regular footage of me pacing around on calls, eating cereal on the couch, napping at weird hours. Then, on a Thursday morning, I'll never forget it. I checked the feed during lunch and saw something that made my whole body go cold. At exactly 9:48 a.m., Brian unlocked my door. He didn't knock, didn't text, just walked in, like he lived there. He had the same gray hoodie, hands in his pockets, and this slow, casual pace like he was just comfortable. But the worst part? He didn't clean. He didn't even bring his usual bag of supplies. He walked over to the couch, sat down, and just stared down the hallway, toward my bedroom door. I wasn't home that morning, thank God. I watched the footage over and over, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. He didn't touch anything. He just sat there, staring in the direction of my room for maybe 10-15 minutes. Then he got up, walked slowly down the hall, and disappeared from frame. I couldn't see what he did next because the camera angle didn't cover my bedroom door. I scrubbed through the footage. 2 minutes later, he came back into view, walked back to the door, locked it from the inside, and left like nothing happened. I sat there on the floor for what felt like forever, replaying the moment he turned the key. He had made a copy. That was the only explanation. I never gave him permission to do that, and I had never once left my key out. I wanted to throw up. That night I didn't go home. I crashed at a friend's apartment barely able to explain what was going on without breaking down. The next morning, I went straight to the hardware store, bought a new lock and changed it myself. I didn't confront Brian. I didn't even message him. I didn't want him to know I'd found out. There was something about the way he just watched that gave me this sick feeling like, maybe that wasn't the first time. Maybe he'd done it before, and I'd just never known. Maybe he'd been in there while I was sleeping. I checked older camera footage just to be sure. There wasn't much stored, but what little I had made it worse. One clip from 3 nights before showed something I still can't erase from my mind. The shape of a man, blurry in the dark, standing just barely in frame at the edge of the hallway at 2:13 in the morning. I was asleep on the couch that night, and you can see me in the shot, passed out under a blanket. He just stood there, half in shadow, not moving. I only caught it because of the way the camera's night vision picked up movement for a split second and triggered a recording. And then he was gone. No sound, no door opening, just gone. I filed a police report that same day. I showed them the footage, gave them his name and number from the Craigslist thread, and even forwarded old texts. But here's the kicker. The number was disconnected by then. And the Craigslist ad? Already deleted. The name Brian didn't bring up anything useful. No arrest record, no business license, nothing. It was like he vanished. The police took it seriously, thankfully. They came by, looked over the apartment, took copies of the footage, but told me that unless they caught him in the act, or had some form of ID, there wasn't much they could do. They said he might have been using a fake name. Or worse, he might have done this before. I stopped living there not long after. Even with the new lock, even with a second camera installed, I couldn't relax. Every creak in the hallway, every shadow outside the window, it all made my heart race. I'd lie in bed with the lights on, waiting for some sign that he was still watching. It was like the apartment had absorbed the fear. I broke my lease 2 months early and moved into a place with a front gate and security cameras in the building. I told the landlord everything. She offered to change the locks again for the next tenant, but I don't know if she ever really understood what had happened inside that place. Sometimes I still wonder if he was watching me long before I noticed. If maybe the cleaning was just an excuse to get in. There were times I'd find a drawer closed slightly different or a shirt folded the wrong way. Things I ignored at the time. I don't know how long he was planning it, or what he was waiting for. That's the part that keeps me up sometimes. The not knowing. Because when someone walks into your home with a key they weren't supposed to have, it changes something in you. You don't feel safe, even when you're alone. Especially when you're alone. I don't use Craigslist anymore, for anything. And I never hire people unless they're through a verified company, with references I can call myself. People think stuff like this only happens in movies, or to someone else. But it doesn't. It happens quietly, slowly. It creeps in without you noticing. Until one day you realize your space, your life, was being shared with someone who was never supposed to be there. And by then, it's too late. They've already memorized the layout. They know your schedule, your routines. They know when you sleep. The police never found him. Not a trace. I still check the local forums sometimes, Reddit, Facebook groups, neighborhood threads, hoping maybe someone else saw him. Or maybe someone else got the same ad, but nothing ever comes up. I've kept the footage backed up just in case, though I try not to watch it anymore. Watching yourself sleep while someone stands nearby, it does something to your brain. It breaks a part of you that you didn't even know could break. I don't know what he wanted. I don't think I want to know. But if you ever hire someone to come into your home, please, please, be careful. Double-check the locks, and trust your gut. I ignored mine and I'm still paying for it. I'm not usually the type to post stuff like this, but after everything that happened, I guess part of me needs to get it out of my system. This all went down a little over a year ago, when I was 19. I had just moved into a small off-campus apartment complex near my university in Indiana. Nothing fancy. Just a basic one-bedroom unit on the second floor of a 3-story building with paper-thin walls and a view of a mostly dead patch of grass out back. I was juggling a part-time job at a pizza place and trying to stay on top of my coursework. Life was fine, kinda boring even. But I remember that time in my life so clearly because it was the first time I ever lived fully on my own. I liked the quiet. I liked having control of my space. I liked not having to talk to anyone unless I wanted to. I started noticing the car maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I moved in. It was an old, dark-colored Buick, maybe navy or black, hard to tell under the streetlights. No plates, not in the front, not in the back. It was always parked about half a block down from my building, on the same side of the street, just past the lamp post. No one ever got out of it. At first I figured it was abandoned, or maybe someone was just too lazy to register it. But then I realized it only showed up at night. Around 10:30, almost like clockwork, it'd be there. Lights off, engine off, and by the time I left for class in the morning, it'd be gone. It bothered me, sure, but I didn't immediately jump to anything crazy. I even joked about it with my coworker Jason one night during a late shift. He said it was probably some sketchy dude sleeping in his car to avoid rent. I let myself believe that. I wanted to believe that. But there was something about the way the car was always parked at an angle, like someone had pulled up just enough to see down the street, but still be hidden in the shadows. I never saw anyone inside, but I swear, every time I passed it, I got that weird prickly feeling on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. Everything changed the night I woke up to the sound of my front door handle rattling. It was around 2:40 in the morning. I remember because I checked my phone the second I sat up. At first I thought it was just someone drunk trying the wrong door. It happens more than you'd think near college housing. But the sound was slow and deliberate, like someone was testing it, not yanking or pounding. Just turning it gently over and over like they were waiting for it to give. I froze. My heart was thudding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The handle stopped after a few seconds, followed by silence. I stayed like that for maybe 10 more minutes before finally getting up, grabbing the heaviest thing I could find, a busted floor lamp, and creeping toward the peephole. No one was there. The next morning I walked around the building to see if maybe I could spot anything weird. At first, there was nothing. Just the usual mess in the parking lot and a few empty beer cans near the dumpster. But when I circled around to the back, I saw it. Clear as day. Tire tracks in the patchy grass that ran right behind my window. Deep ones too, like whoever it was had pulled up real close. And next to the AC unit under my bedroom window, I found a cluster of cigarette butts, like 5 or 6, all stubbed out in the same spot. I don't smoke, and I'd never seen anyone hanging around that part of the building before. That's when the fear really started to kick in. Someone had been standing right outside my bedroom, watching, waiting, smoking. I went to the leasing office and told them everything. They acted concerned, took down the details, said they'd keep an eye out. But I could tell they didn't think much of it. Probably figured I was being paranoid or trying to break a lease early or something. That afternoon I filed a police report. The officer who came out, Officer Reynolds, I still remember his name, was calm and polite, but I could tell he'd heard stuff like this 1,000 times. He took some photos of the tire marks and the cigarette butts, asked me if I had any exes or enemies, then said they'd do a couple extra patrols around the area that week. That was about it. I tried to go back to normal, but I couldn't sleep right after that. Every little noise had me on edge. I started putting a chair under the doorknob at night and kept a steak knife by the bed. I even stopped wearing headphones when I studied, just so I could hear if someone was outside. A couple nights later, I saw the car again. Same spot, same time. But this time, when I looked out the window, the dome light flashed on for a second, just long enough for me to see the shape of someone in the driver's seat. I ducked down so fast I knocked over a cup of water on my desk. I didn't look again after that. That's when I decided to tell my professor. I know that sounds random, but I'd missed a few classes already because I was barely sleeping, and my head was all over the place. When I pulled her aside after class and explained what was going on, she looked weirdly unsettled. Not surprised, just quiet. Then she asked me a question I wasn't expecting. "Have you worked with anyone this semester who gave you a strange vibe?" At first I said no. But then she brought up this guy, Tyler. We'd been in a group project together about a month earlier. I remembered him because he barely said a word the entire time. Didn't make eye contact, didn't offer anything to the group. I think I only spoke directly to him once. He always looked kind of blank, like he wasn't really there. I didn't think much of Tyler back then. He just seemed like one of those quiet, awkward types who preferred to work alone. But the more I thought about it, the more little things started to come back. Like how he always sat near the back of the room, staring at people when he thought no one was watching. Or how, during our group meetings, I'd catch him glancing at me. Not in a casual way, but like he was studying my every move. Still, I didn't want to believe he had anything to do with what was happening. It just didn't make sense. We barely talked. I even forgot his last name. A few days after that conversation with my professor, the cops set up a plainclothes unit in an unmarked car across the street from my building. They didn't tell me the exact plan, just said to go about my business like normal. That night I didn't sleep. I just laid there in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart racing, every creak of the building making me flinch. And then, around 3 a.m., it happened. I heard footsteps on the metal stairs outside, then the unmistakable sound of my doorknob turning again. But this time, before I could even react, I heard shouting. Fast, heavy footsteps. A scuffle. Then silence. Turns out the guy had parked around the corner and walked through the empty lot behind the building. He had gloves, a flashlight, and this is the part that still freaks me out, a freaking printed photo of me from my student ID, folded up in his jacket pocket. It was Tyler, the quiet guy from my class. According to the cops, he'd been stalking me for weeks. They found more cigarette butts near the back window, and even a torn-up notebook with what looked like my schedule written out by hand. He never said a word when they arrested him. Just stared at me through the back window of the squad car like he was disappointed. He ended up getting charged with trespassing and attempted burglary, but I don't think they could prove the stalking part well enough. I transferred out of that school the next semester and moved back home for a while. To this day, I triple-check every lock before bed, and I still can't sleep if I see a car parked on the street with no plates. The weirdest part is how invisible he was. How someone I barely remembered from a class had built this whole obsession in silence, without me having a clue. It makes you think how many people notice you, really notice you, without you ever realizing it. I was 19 when it happened, a sophomore in college, living with my grandparents in a quiet, tree-lined suburb just outside of Dayton, Ohio. My parents had moved overseas for work, and I didn't want to live in the dorms anymore, so staying with Grandma Ruth and Grandpa Walter made the most sense. They were sweet, old-fashioned people, retired teachers, the kind that still mailed birthday cards and left extra cookies in your backpack. Our street was peaceful. One of those neighborhoods where everyone mowed their lawn on Saturdays and nothing ever seemed to happen. Or at least, that's what I thought. It was a Friday afternoon in late September, the kind of day that smells like dying leaves and wet earth, just chilly enough to wear a hoodie. I didn't have any classes after lunch, so I got home around 2 p.m. and found my grandparents already dozing off in the living room. They usually took a nap around that time, their favorite true crime show humming softly on the TV. I figured I'd let them rest while I got a bit of fresh air before starting my readings for Monday. I left my phone charging on the kitchen counter, grabbed the spare key from the hook, and went for a walk around the block. I remember thinking how still everything was, how the only sound was the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. I wasn't gone long, 20 minutes, maybe 25. Just long enough to clear my head. But when I came back, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious at first. The porch light was off like it always was during the day. The mailbox still shut. But as I stepped up to the door, I noticed it wasn't latched all the way. It was just slightly cracked open, like someone had pulled it shut in a hurry but hadn't made sure it clicked into place. I froze for a second. My first thought was that maybe Grandpa had gone out to get the mail and didn't close it properly. But then I remembered they were both napping. I had seen them just 20 minutes ago, both curled up under that worn plaid blanket on the couch. I pushed the door open slowly. The hinges creaked like they always did, and everything looked exactly the same, at least at first glance. The hallway smelled faintly of cinnamon, from the candle Grandma kept in the kitchen. I walked in, trying not to make a sound like I was trespassing in my own house. "Grandma?" I whispered. No answer. I stepped into the living room and found them both still asleep, heads tilted back, the TV now showing some wildlife documentary. Nothing had been touched. No mess, no noise, no sign of struggle. But something still wasn't right. It was the kind of tension you feel in your chest before you even know what you're reacting to. Like your body knows something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. I backed out of the living room quietly and started checking the rest of the house, trying to convince myself I was just being paranoid. The kitchen looked fine. The chairs were still tucked in, the fruit bowl untouched. But when I got to the hallway that led to the bedrooms, I noticed that my door was slightly open, which was weird because I always closed it all the way before leaving, especially since Grandma's cat loved jumping on my bed when I wasn't around. I nudged it open and scanned the room. Nothing looked stolen or even moved, but then I saw the top drawer of my desk was open just a crack. That drawer had been closed, I was sure of it. I walked over, and when I pulled it out, my stomach sank. Inside there was an envelope where I kept some cash and a backup student ID. The cash was still there, $20 and $10 bills folded neatly. But the schedule I kept tucked behind it, the one printed on bright yellow paper with my name, classes, and times, that was gone. I flipped through the rest of the drawer, hoping I was just imagining things, but no, it was definitely missing. I checked the other drawers. A few papers looked out of order, like someone had rifled through them, but nothing else stood out. It was like someone had been searching for something specific and knew exactly what to take. I rushed to my grandparents' room next. The door was locked. That door was never locked. It didn't even have a proper keyhole, just one of those twist locks on the knob. I knocked gently. No answer. I knocked again, louder. That time Grandpa stirred. I could hear him shuffle toward the door and fumble with the lock. When he opened it, he looked confused. "Did you lock us in?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. My grandma was still half asleep on the bed behind him. I told him no, and that's when the weirdness really set in. They hadn't even noticed. Someone had locked the door from the inside, with them in it, then somehow slipped out without waking them or making a sound. I checked the windows, all closed, nothing broken. I looked in the closets, under the beds, even in the laundry room, every inch of that house. I wanted to believe I was wrong, that I was being dramatic. But then I went back to the kitchen and looked at the key hook by the back door, and noticed something else. The spare house key that always hung there was missing. We only ever used that one if someone lost theirs. It had this little red plastic tag on it that made it easy to spot. And it was just gone. My voice cracked when I called out to my grandparents again. I asked if they'd taken it for any reason, if they'd been outside, but they just looked at me, still groggy and confused. Neither of them had moved from that couch the entire time I was gone. I called the non-emergency police line and reported a suspected break-in, even though technically nothing had been broken. An officer came by about 30 minutes later, did a sweep of the house, asked me a lot of questions. He was nice enough, but I could tell he didn't think much of it. No forced entry, no items of value missing. Could be a kid testing doors, he said, or maybe someone casing the place and got spooked when you came back. I nodded, but it didn't feel right. Why would someone risk going inside in the middle of the day with two people asleep just a few feet away? And why only take a key and my class schedule? It didn't make sense. But the worst part? The officers said there wasn't much they could do. No fingerprints, no footage. We didn't have any security cameras. We never needed them. Until now. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made my heart race. I kept replaying everything in my head over and over, wondering if I'd missed something. I even checked the bushes around the house with a flashlight, half expecting to see someone crouching there. My bedroom window faced the backyard, and I couldn't shake the image of someone standing out there in the dark, just watching. I kept all the lights on in my room and pushed my desk in front of the door. It felt stupid, but it made me feel slightly less exposed. I couldn't help but think, whoever it was, they had a key now, and they knew exactly where I was and when I'd be gone. My name, my classes, my routine. They could follow me, walk into the house again whenever they wanted. And I'd never even hear them. The next morning, I told my grandparents I was going to stay with a friend from campus for a while. I didn't tell them everything. They were already shaken, and I didn't want to scare them more. But I changed the locks before I left. I called a locksmith and had every single entry point rekeyed. I also bought a set of battery-powered security cams and installed one by the front and back doors before I packed my bags. My grandparents insisted they'd be fine, but I made them promise to always lock every door and keep their phones nearby. For the next few weeks, I barely went anywhere without looking over my shoulder. Every time someone brushed past me in the hallway at school, I'd wonder, was that them? Was it someone who had stood in my bedroom and looked through my things? Nothing ever happened after that. No strange knocks. No more missing keys. I never saw anyone suspicious on campus or caught anything weird on the cameras. It was like whoever did it got what they wanted and moved on. But I never got my class schedule back, and I still wonder why they took it. Why not a laptop, or jewelry, or cash? Just a key and a printed piece of paper with my weekly routine on it. It felt personal, like someone wanted to get close without being noticed. I've moved twice since then, and I'm a lot more careful now. Double locks, alarms, cameras, the whole deal. But I'll never forget the way that door looked when I came back, just slightly open. Like someone had been waiting for the perfect moment to step inside.